Let's draw exercise number 18. We're supposed to draw the pipe here shown, or a pipe fitting. It doesn't say how to do it, so we can use fillets and lines, circles, and just with these given dimensions. So let's do that. I'm going to put these side by side. What we know here is that the dimensions are in metric units or decimal units. So we'll make sure that the first thing we need to do is make sure we're in that units, that we're not working in feet and inches. Then we got to decide where to start. So this is the side view and the top view of this pipe fitting. We know that this flange and this flange are the same. This flange and this flange are the same. That top flange is the same as this top flange. So we can draw one of the faces and then use these lines as reference for the other faces. I'm going to start at the top line here. So the first thing I'm going to do is draw a circle. The smaller circle, it says here that there's two of them with a diameter of 1 unit. So, and I'm going to select the origin of 0, 0. So the first thing it asks me to do is specify the center point of that circle. So I'm going to type 0, 0. And then specify the diameter. It says the diameter is 1 unit. So I'll make sure I click on diameter. It always defaults to radius. So I'm going to click on diameter and I'm going to type 1. And where did it go? There it is. It was so small, so tiny that we didn't see it. We don't see it. Also, what I'm also going to do here is hide my grid. So there's my circle. Just to check it, I'm going to list it. And sure enough, where is it? Radius of 0.5. That means my diameter is 1. That's this first little circle. And then there's a bigger circle here that has a diameter of 1.9. So I'm going to do that circle now. C for circle, or you click the button, and the center point again is going to be my origin here. So 0, 0, enter. And the diameter, I'm just going to type 1.9. And if you notice, it looks out of proportion because I forgot to enter it as a diameter. By default, it goes to radius, and since I didn't click the diameter part, it drew it twice as big as it needs to be. So if I list it here, you're going to notice the radius is 1.9, where it should be the diameter. So we talked about the properties. So I'm going to click on that circle and type properties, and I'll see here that the radius 1.9 and diameter is 3.8. I can just change the diameter here to 1.9, and notice as soon as I hit enter that the radius is going to change to 0.95. It says 1 because it rounded. Then that's part of the units. It's still 0.95, but it rounded to the nearest tenth, I think. But anyways, I know that it is correct now because I entered the diameter right. So now we got that circle there. Now, let's draw these lines, the outer. So what these lines indicate is the outer part of the pipe and then the inner side of the pipe, because the pipe has some thickness. And so that's the thickness of the pipe, and we can see it here. That's the outer part of the pipe, and that's the thickness. So the pipe itself has a width or the diameter of 1.2, and then inner dimension. So there's the outer dimension of the pipe, which is 1.2, and the inner diameter of 1.0. So the thickness is 0.1 on either side, 0.1 here and 0.1 here, and that's how it gets to 1.2. So I know that the pipe, the outside dimensions of the pipe is 1.2 diameter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw myself a reference line, and I'm going to stretch it across here, and I'm going to turn my grid off because that's making it difficult for me. Make sure my ortho's on, and I'm just going to stretch this. So I know that if the diameter of that pipe is 1.2, that means the radius is half of that. I'm going to offset this line by the radius up and down, and that's going to give me the outer line of this pipe. So I'm going to go to offset, and it's going to ask me the distance, so I'm going to type 0.6. Now I'm going to offset that line to the top and to the bottom. So that right there is these two lines. And then I'm going to offset that same line, but this time by 0.5, which is the inner dimension of the pipe. Right now it says 0.6 because that's the last thing I did. I want to change that to 0.5, and if I offset that line, so that's the inner part of the pipe. Now the lines that they're showing us here are hidden lines. That means it's something that exists, but it's obscured by the surfaces in front of us. We haven't yet worked on that, so I'm going to wait, and I'm going to just leave them this way. This one is a reference line for us, and this is the inner and outer edges of the pipe. I'm going to leave those. What else do we know? Where are those flanges? So I'm going to go over here and see the entire length of my fitting is 2.525. So I'm going to draw myself another line from the center of the circle as a reference, and I'm going to erase that later. And I'm going to offset it by half of that, 2.525. Well, I don't want to do the math, but I think AutoCAD will do it for me. So I'm going to tell it offset, and I'm going to have I'm going to type it 2.525 over 2, and then AutoCAD will do my calculation. And I'm going to offset it. Did it do it? I don't think it did. Let me just see here. Offset 2.525 over 2. Enter. Is that right? No, that's not right. It says, well, it identifies it as an error. Requires numeric distance. Okay. So I'm going to try something else. I'm just going to type the 2.525, enter. And that's the length of my pipe, but it isn't centered on my circle. There's two ways of doing that. I can shift these lines over half my distance, or I can shift the circle over half the distance. What I'm going to do is I'm going to shift the lines half the distance. I still don't want to do the math on this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw another reference line from my reference lines, and then I'm going to use, and I know I'm going to go from here to here. I'm going to move only half the distance of that line. So I'm going to go to move. I'm going to move these three objects from here only to the middle of that line. And if you see, now we're nice and centered on that. I'm going to erase this reference line that I had. And I have the outer edges of my flanges. The flanges are 0.125 thick, so I'm going to offset that. Offset 0.125, enter, and we're going inwards. And that's the inner edges of my flange. What else do I know about this? I know that all three flanges are circles, 3 circles of 0.190 diameter. Well, I could try to figure out that dimension, but I know that if the big circle, the outer edge of that circle has to line up with the edge. So in other words, the outer edge of this circle has to line up with that horizontal line of the flange, and same with the bottom. So I'm going to draw a line from that quadrant across, and I'm going to stretch it. Then I can just do a little trimming. I'll use my trim command, and I'm going to start trimming things, because I think I'm done with my top. So I'm trimming that and that. And I have my top flange and my side flanges. Let me trim also the pipe itself. And on the trim command, you can use the window selection as well. And that's it. I believe I have my top face drawn. I'm going to erase that center reference line that I drew earlier. And there I have it. These, we're going to learn how to do the hidden lines later, but that's essentially what my pipe looks like. Now let's do the bottom. The bottom is pretty similar to this one, except it's rotated. So I know the bottom has the same flanges and the same pipe. So I'm just going to copy this down here. What else do I know? Do I need to know? The top of the flange is 1.2 units from the center line of the pipe. So I'm going to draw another reference line that goes to the middle of the pipe. I'm just going to extend it here so that I know that that's my reference line. Then I'm going to offset it by that given distance of 1.2. So offset 1.2, hit enter, and of course I'm sitting on the bottom of it. It wants to offset to the bottom. I'm going to go to the top and click above it. And that is the top of this flange. And we know the thickness because somewhere here it told me there's 3 of them at 0.125. So now I got to offset that line by 0.125 down. There I have my top flange. Well, where are the edges of my flange? Try to find the middle of that and offset it by half of that, or because I know the width of the flange is the diameter of the circle, I'm just going to draw a line from the circle itself, and there I have my flange after I do a little trimming. So I used all of those as my cutting edges, and there is my top flange. Now all I have to do is draw the pipe, and we know that the pipe has a diameter of 1.2. That one's easy to do because that's easy to divide in half. So I'm going to draw me a reference line down the middle of that flange, and I'm going to offset it by half of that 1.2. So that'll be 0.6 to the left and to the right. And of course I know the thickness of the pipe, which is 1, or the inside dimension of the pipe, which is 1, so I need to offset that also by 0.5. So that's the inner dimension of the pipe here, these 2 lines, and that's the outer dimension of the pipe, these 2 lines there. Now all I got to do is start doing that chamfer right there, that fillet with a radius of 2. So I'm gonna modify fillet. I'm gonna type R for radius, and I'm gonna enter 0.2, and I'm just gonna fillet these two parts. I think I clicked the wrong button. Fillet, radius, 0.2, enter, and I'm gonna click here, here, and here. There we go. And it showed up. The thing that happened is this line used to be all the way across and it cut it. And so it disappeared. Now I can't fillet this with anything because that line is gone. So what I'm going to do is erase it. And I'm just going to mirror this geometry here and land it over here. So I'm going to do modify mirror and select the three objects. Use the middle of the flange as my reference point. And look what happens here if I go up. So that's my pipe. And essentially that's it. I'm going to erase my center lines, my reference lines. And then I'm just going to trim these hidden lines here. And I can chamfer this with a distance of 0, or I can fillet it with a distance of 0. Rather than do fillet, because I already have something entered, I'm going to do chamfer, because it will default to 0. So distance 1, 0, distance 2, 0. And I'm just going to chamfer these guys here, here. And just like before that line disappeared, I can just draw another line here, perpendicular to there. And I'm going to chamfer that line and that line, and there they are. The other thing, it kind of internally, there'll be some hidden lines that will do this, and they're at 45 degrees. So I'm just going to draw a line here, and then a line here, and I'm going to rotate them 45 degrees. This one rotates 45 degrees in the counterclockwise direction. That's positive 45. And there it goes. And this one rotates in the other way. So that's positive 315 or negative 45. I'm going to type negative 45. And then I'm going to chamfer these two lines. And there's that point right there. Okay, so there's my flange, minus, of course, minus all the hidden lines. But that's the gist of my flange.